today. Let me just say a couple of things by way of background of this report, and then I'll give about 3 key messages that we obtained from it. So the Innocenti report card series is a report that is produced every year by the Office of Research, and is the only report in the world that focuses on child being on high-income countries. In this way, we complement all the other work produced on child well-being in developing countries. And this year, the report is about the state of child well-being in high-income countries, specifically in 41 EU and OECD countries. And we monitor 10 SDGs, 10 Sustainable Development Goals, and 25 targets, specifically for children. In some cases, we follow the consensus goals and targets that are truly universal for every child everywhere. And in other cases, we have to produce specific targets that will fill a gap in terms of monitoring the child well-being. This is a report that monitors. It doesn't go into the specifics of policies or reasons behind these results. It's just setting the baseline for future monitoring. In terms of the key messages, let me just give you 3. The first one is that rich countries remain today still at a considerable distance from achieving the Sustainable Development Goals that are most relevant to children. If I were to grade all countries, no one will get an A. There are good news, of course, in quite a number of targets and areas. For instance, childhood learning or reductions in neonatal mortality rates. But there are also substantive gaps in some targets, such as, for instance, poverty, reduction of children, increasing inequality, increasing obesity, and worsening mental health. In the case of inequality, we see that households with children, poor households with children, has fallen behind in terms of their incomes with respect to the rich households. This is important because you will not achieve to leave no child behind if you increase inequality. The second point is that income and economic growth alone have not taken children in rich countries out of these unacceptable deprivations they suffer, and it's unlikely that they will do in the future. We see that richer countries don't necessarily always do better than poorer countries among EU and OECD countries, and also for several goals, every single country can do better. Final point is that children well-being need to be unapologetically at the center of the policy and investment agendas of governments in the rich world. We need to invest today more and better in children in general, and more specifically on the most vulnerable, if we want to leave no child behind and we want to strengthen and improve their future well-being. This is a commitment and a responsibility for every single country, also in the rich world. Thank you.
One of the key features of every Innocenti report card is the league table. In the 14th edition of the Innocenti report card, we have ranked 41 countries of the European Union and the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development across 9 dimensions of sustainable development for children, 9 sustainable development goals. Even though we have evaluated performance across 10 goals, one of them, gender equality, could not be included in the composite ranking because we do not have the data for all the countries that would be of good quality and cross-country comparability. In fact, this report underlines and highlights significant data gaps in monitoring the sustainable development goals for children in rich countries, particularly in the areas of gender, violence against children, early childhood development, and migration. So back to the league table. Across the 41 rich countries, the 7 that are at the top include all of the Nordic countries, Norway, Denmark, Sweden, Finland, and Iceland, and Germany and Switzerland. At the bottom of the league table, the bottom 7 countries include 3 of the countries in the Americas, and that is Chile, Mexico, and the United States, 2 countries in the Balkans, that is Bulgaria and Romania, and 2 Middle Eastern countries, Israel and Turkey. No country does well in all the goals. Even Norway ranks in the middle third on responsible consumption and production, and in the bottom third on peace, justice, and strong institutions, or as we use the shorthand for that goal, the violence goal. The countries at the bottom of the league table do consistently badly across all the goals. There is some relationship between the so-called traditional goals of poverty, nutrition, education, health, and inequality. The countries that are more unequal tend to do worse on poverty, nutrition, health, and education. And there is somewhat less consistency between the so-called older goals, such as poverty, nutrition, health, and education, and the new goals of environmental sustainability, safe cities, and violence. Those are the new goals that have been introduced by the Sustainable Development Agenda that were not included in the Millennium Development Goals. Children do badly on poverty. While on average about 1 in 2 children are income poor, they live in families that have income from all sources below 60% of the national median. There is a lot of variation across the 41 countries. While only 1 in 10 children are poor in Denmark, nearly 2 in 5 children are poor in Romania. Goal 1 of the Sustainable Development Agenda highlights that poverty has to be halved by 2030 among women, men, and children in all its dimensions. That is why the UNICEF report card also reports on a measure of multidimensional child poverty. And we see that across the European Union, more than 1 in 3 children lack at least 2 out of 7 dimensions of child well-being, such as nutrition, clothing, educational resources, leisure activities, social activities, information access, and housing. These are all key dimensions of child well-being, and we use them to measure multidimensional child poverty. We also have some stark variation in the rates of food insecurity faced by children in rich countries. We use the official SDG indicator of food insecurity, and that is the food insecurity experience scale that has been developed by the Food and Agricultural Administration's Voices of the Hungry project. While in Japan, only 1 in 70 children face food insecurity, in Mexico, it goes up to more than 1 in 3 children. We have some positive trends over time and some negative trends. The positive trends are, of course, the reductions in neonatal mortality, teenage suicide, child drunkenness, and teenage fertility, but there are some worsening trends in adolescent mental health, income inequality, and the rates of obesity and overweight among children. The report card highlights that not only do we need to put children at the heart of sustainable development, and not only do we need to leave no child behind, and that means including all children in data collection, including those who are excluded from schools and residential households, but we also need to collect better data on the so-called missing issues, such as gender, migration, violence against children, and early childhood education and development. On some of these issues, we have better data for the global south than the global north. And finally, these rankings in the UNICEF report card have to be used by rich countries to help them domesticate the Sustainable Development Agenda and to learn from the best, to learn from countries at the top of our league table, because progress for children is policy susceptible. And rich countries have to honor the commitments to global sustainable development by spearheading the efforts towards global environmental sustainability, development assistance, and monitoring and delivering progress for children in rich countries themselves. Thank you.
Thank you, Yekaterina. Thank you, José. We have 15 minutes now to take your questions.
The data for figure 2.1 are taken from the forthcoming Innocenti working paper by Pereira et al. That is coming out on Thursday at the same time as the report card itself. And the reason the numbers may not look like the official numbers for the whole population is because they have been reweighted by the proportion of children under 15 in these countries. So for example, a country like the United Kingdom does worse on our child-specific measure than the whole population measure, because children in families, in large families with more children, are at a high risk of poverty and also food insecurity, and so things look worse for children on this measure than for the whole population metric.
Yes, I'm sorry if I can follow through. You're mentioning, for instance, UK 19.5 and Greece around 15%. I think the figures for Greece are probably 3 times higher. So I don't know where you come with 15% for Greece, which is very low.
Yes, the figure for Greece is indeed somewhat lower than the figure for the United Kingdom, but you have to keep in mind that this is an experience scale. It is based on 8 questions. So in the past 12 months, have you or your household experienced any of the following? And the questions go from something like, have worried about where we would get food from, to things like have gone the whole day without eating at all. And these 8 questions are combined and added into this food insecurity experience metric. So the results are not always as you would expect. I wouldn't read very much into the difference between Greece and the United Kingdom.
I'm sorry if I might cut in.
Because they're actually quite close together.
Do you have any epidemiological data, levels of anemia, etc., or are you just basing it on an opinion poll? Because many times in an opinion poll,
policies and the effectiveness of different interventions across countries. I mean, what is clear is, your policy choices, in addition to economic growth, and your exposure to shocks and the way you cope with them, and your social policy infrastructure, all these things are going to affect the results you get. I mean, we don't want to go into details because this report doesn't do it, so I'll stop there.
Stefan.
I could address your food stamps question if you like, because even though this report doesn't go into policy detail, 3 years ago we released the Children of the Recession, report card 12, and also more recently in April, the UNICEF Office of Research and Oxford University Press have published an edited volume called Children of Austerity that includes a chapter on the United States written by well-known US academics. And both those publications show that between 2008 and roughly 2013, 2014, food stamps have been instrumental in cushioning the impact of the recent global economic crisis on children. And the United States, in terms of child poverty rates, has not done as badly during the recent period of economic turmoil as could have been expected. So the food stamps policy has been very helpful to low-income families with children. We have good evidence on that.
Just one very quick question, and that is...
Very quickly, Lisa. Thank you.
Very quickly.
Yeah, we have 4 minutes.
Is there, are there some countries that have risen in the ranks that actually have improved the well-being of children since your last report?
We use different measures between the recent reports, so there is no comparability, and it would be difficult to say which countries have really improved. But in this particular report card, we have to highlight Slovenia, for example. that has much lower GDP per capita than a country like the United States, and yet it ranks 9th out of 41 countries. So it's not so much about comparing trends between the different report cards, but here for the Sustainable Development Agenda, you can see that, for instance, Luxembourg and the United States do worse than could have been expected given their national wealth, and countries like Slovenia, for example, do a lot better than expected.
Stephanie and then Jamie.
Sorry, actually my question was more or less asked by Lisa, but perhaps we could just come back. You mentioned early on about Chile, Mexico, and the U.S., as well as some of the Balkan countries being towards the bottom. Could you just flesh out a little bit more on the Latin American side?
So on the Latin American side, Chile and Mexico, I mean, here the level of development is lower than other countries in the European Union, of course, and other OECD countries. The levels of poverty and inequality are higher, and also the percentage of GDP that goes into social policies is also lower than other countries. So I think these are...
Very much. They are here for you because this is the only, it is under embargo. Very important to remind you that this is the only development goals in rich countries. So this is the only pre-embargo press briefing. For your information, of course, other national pre-embargo media briefing is now with you here. It's 2 a.m. For Geneva time. This report on child well-being is a reminder to 41 high-income. I was particularly, what struck me in these reports are a few figures that I'm just going to highlight, and then I will give the floor to the real authors of this report, and then they will be happy to take your questions. What struck me personally was that there is, of course, a wide variation. An average of 1 child in 8 faces food insecurity. 1 15 years old in 5. But there are also good news, just to be balanced in these reports. The teenage birth rate, for instance, is falling. Again, I have a pleasure to pass the floor to you first. Jose, thank you.
This type of monitoring than objective measures. And it's also very difficult to get objective measures on things like anemia for all the countries. The best one we have for monitoring the SDGs. And the working paper is coming out on Thursday. There is a lot more information there.
Lisa.
This is Sean, North America. Maybe I shouldn't be shown between them. And then specifically in the United States, the Trump administration is considering